Good morning and welcome to Coffee Talk. As promised, I told you guys that I was going to have my mom come on Coffee Talk this morning to talk about what it was like to lose. That light is going to drive me nuts, so we'll turn it this way. Not that one, it was that one. What it was like to lose my father. As most of you know, in 1992, my father developed a cough, and it wasn't until April of 1993 that we found out that the cough was actually a tumor in his lung that was pushing up on his esophagus, causing him to cough. And then 6 months after his diagnosis, he died. My mom was, how old were you at the time?
46.
46, and had 4 children. One was out of the house, one was in college. I was a senior in high school, and David, my brother, was 10. So, did you know Daddy was going to die?
I was told that he was not going to live as short a time as he did. I knew he was going to die, but I was aware of the fact that he could live 3 to 5 years. He wound up living 6 months from the diagnosis.
Okay, so your husband dies, you have 4 kids.
Yes.
And Daddy was the kind of guy who took care of a lot of things, took care of a lot of things, right?
Absolutely. Even the garbage.
Even the garbage. So talk about what it's like to be a mom, and suddenly now you're not a wife. That title is now stripped from you because now you're a widow. People put that term on you. All of a sudden you're a widow. That's not something you sign up for.
Right.
Right?
Certainly not at that age.
Right. So what happens? You wake up and your life is now completely different.
Well, the first thing that happened was that Daddy died in the house, in his sleep. I had put him to bed the night before. Took off his shoes, took off his watch, made sure he was comfortable. Last thing I heard was him going to the bathroom. I was downstairs, toilet flushing. And then I had been sleeping downstairs because he was not comfortable during the night, and I needed to sleep to make sure I took care of you and your brother at the time, who were the only 2 at home. And I realized that for a very long time in the morning, when I thought he should have been coming down the steps, he didn't. So I surmised something was not right, and I went up the steps, and when I went into the room, I saw from a distance as I walked in that he had passed away.
But tell me what happens after everything is over.
After
everybody goes away,
right.
The Shiva's over,
right.
And now you find yourself a widow.
I'm a widow, and absolutely my whole life is turned upside down. I was a very self-sufficient, independent woman who was able to, from the day I got married, do everything on my own that I wanted to do. I was able to eat in a restaurant by myself. I can go to a movie by myself. I was able to go to a casino by myself. I did some banking. All of a sudden, I couldn't do anything, and it took me a very long time. I did the necessities, such as banking, such as food shopping, but I couldn't do more than one thing for the first year. More than one thing in a day. If I went to the bank, it was overwhelming. I had to come home. If I went to the market, I had to come home. I couldn't go to do anything else. And I walked around feeling like everybody was looking at me like, oh, look at that poor woman. And of course it wasn't true, but that was the feeling that I had in my heart, was that I was this poor woman with children, left alone. And I know in my heart of hearts, the last thing in the world my husband wanted to do was to leave his family. But it was very difficult, and I cried when my children were in school so that they wouldn't see me crying, because I wanted their life to go on as normally as possible, even though mine wasn't. And when you lose your spouse, it's the hardest thing in the world, other than, I imagine, God forbid, a child. But all of a sudden you're alone, you're not a missus anymore. You're still a mom, and I had to take care of my kids. But if I couldn't, then making out bills was overwhelming. It took me 2 years of crying. They say you cry for every month that you were married, and pretty much that's true. I was married for 25 and a half years when Lou died, and I cried for 2 years, every single day, every single weekend when my kids weren't around. And
Did you make a conscious decision not to cry in front of us?
absolutely, I didn't want to. I didn't want your life to change because you were already a senior in high school and you had a life and you were doing a play and so many, you had friends and you had a boyfriend, and at that age, even though it was a tremendous loss in your life to lose the first male love of your life, I wanted your life to go on, and it does when you're a kid.
You know what's interesting is I think I felt the impact of Daddy dying later in life than I did when he actually died. Because when I was 17, I was still very self-consumed. And when you're 17 and then you're going to college, life goes on, it moves very quickly. I really felt the impact of losing Daddy when I wanted to get married and when I started to have children. I realized how much he was missing. Because what am I contributing while I'm in, what am I contributing to the world while I'm sorting my life out and going to college? Nothing. He wasn't missing anything. Yeah, he didn't see me graduate high school or graduate from college, but nothing nearly as significant as not seeing me get married or not seeing my children. Baby. Yeah, that was, so then you go on, and at some point, I'm sure in the beginning you thought you would be in that place forever.
Oh, it would never end. It would just never end. I just kept saying, I don't understand what happened. Even though I knew the physical part of it, of what was wrong with Daddy, I just couldn't understand how he got so sick so quickly without ever having a cold even. I mean, he was a man that went to work every single day. And I thought this was going to be it forever. I was just going to keep crying and crying and not understand. I kept questioning the same thing over and over. How did this happen? How could he have been so sick for such a short period of time? They told me he would live 3 to 5 years. I kept saying, by that time, maybe they'll find a cure. Maybe it'll be a miracle. Maybe just with praying, it would work. Did all those things, and it just didn't work. And fortunately, he died peacefully, but he went through a lot of torture to get to the point of peacefulness. And
did you think that eventually, at some point you see that the storm is going to pass, and you start to, food tastes good again, and music, you can listen to music without crying?
Well, I realized that the first thing I realized was that I was able to go meet a friend for dinner, which I didn't do at the beginning. I had very good friends. Joanne and Barry were wonderful to me. They were very close friends. They still are. And they would always say to me, come meet us for dinner. We're going to go for dinner. Or we want you to come to the movies. And at the beginning, I just couldn't do it. And then as time passed, as painful as it was not having your dad with me, I was able to join them because they were very good friends and they understood exactly where I was coming from. They were with me every day.
And that's a weird feeling at first, right? Going out as not part of a couple anymore. I would imagine.
Do it with anybody else but them because we were so close. But other people asked, and I couldn't even meet friends for lunch for a very long time because I was so consumed with the fact of sadness and people saying to me, oh, how are you doing, and how are you doing, and do you need anything? And I didn't want to constantly be reminded from other people that I was in this position.
That's the thing about sadness, is when it's consuming you, you are completely consumed. So people asking how you're doing, it's almost like word vomit. You can't say anything because it's so much. It's like wearing a coat full of weights.
Right.
And every day you're just going through carrying this.
And every time anybody wanted to talk about it, I would get hysterical crying again because if I was okay on my own terms, in my own privacy. But when people started to ask me, how are you doing, and can we do anything for you, or I would just start crying again. All my friends had their husbands, and I miss mine very, very much as part of my life, as part of my children's life, as part of my social life. He was a wonderful husband. He was a wonderful son-in-law to my parents. He was a good friend. If you needed him, he was there. I still can't understand how such a good person could have had such a horrible time for that year. It was just unbelievable. But I kept praying and hoping, and I guess somewhere in my heart, I just believed that he would be okay, even though in reality, I knew he wouldn't.
There are so many women in the Coffee Talk, on the Coffee Talk planet, who watch with me every day, who recently, can you close that door for 1 second?
I'm just getting these cards.
Well, okay. You all like Charlie, so you're welcome. There are so many women on the Coffee Talk planet whose husbands have recently, in the last 2 years, died, and some suddenly, some from illness, but they are in that space right now, that place where they can only do one thing a day, where they haven't yet been able to go into his closet
Right.
and take out his things.
Well, I kept adding
or-
things for about at least maybe 2 to 3 years. I never touched any of
But-
his clothing.
What would you say to them now that you've come out on the other side of it? You know where they are.
I know
What-
exactly the feelings that they're going through, the anguish, the sadness, just the horror of not having that person that you love with you anymore. It does get easier. I know you don't want to hear it, but I heard it and I didn't believe it. But I can tell you from experience, time is the only friend that you have when you lose somebody that you love, no matter who it is time is your only friend. Because without time, it would just seem like it would be forever and ever, but it's not. It does get easier. You never, ever forget that person. You may say their name 100 times every day for the rest of your life. And think about them every single day. But the pain and the reality of it and the sorrow gets a little easier. And I can only say that from my own experience, because you're walking in my shoes and I have walked in your shoes. Take your time. Don't let anybody tell you not to cry or anything of that nature that would make you feel annoyed or angry. I can only tell you that it does get easier, and I can't tell you when. Some people 6 months, a year, some people 5 years. It depends upon the individual and how you can cope with it, and maybe how you have other interests, such as your children, maybe an organization, a hobby. Maybe one day you can get back into some of those things, and that will kind of guide your life in a way where you can accept what happened to you. Just do it in your own time. Be there for your family. Let them be there for you. You can cry in front of them if that's what's comfortable for you. It wasn't for me because I had a 10-year-old son. And I didn't want him to see his mother cry because he wouldn't really understand the whole concept of what was going on. The day that his dad died, he was coming out of the bedroom and I was walking out of my bedroom, and I grabbed his hand to take him down the steps, and I said, "Son, Daddy is very sick and I have to call the doctor, so you're going to have to go to the neighbor now." And I called my neighbor. It was early in the morning. I said, "David's coming over to, would you please take him? I have to call the doctor." She said, "Sure." She waited for him outside. I watched him run over.
He was protected from it from the very beginning.
He was.
He didn't really understand how sick my father was, and
No.
my dad died on Halloween, and he didn't really get it, but
No,
he certainly gets it now at 30. How old is David?
32.
32. So for anybody who's watching,
Just know that it's a heartache and it's a terrible, terrible pain and a hole in your heart. But
But
like
it
I
does
said,
get better.
It does get better. I
It gets-
promise you
it gets different. That's what I can say. It gets different. I don't want to say better versus
No,
worse, but
a
it
little
gets
easier.
it gets
to
easier and it
accept
gets
your
different.
life as it is
It gets
today.
different. And for those of you who have already been through it, please comment and let people know how you are coping with it and how you're dealing with it. For those of you that are going through it right now, comment and let us know so we can support you. We love you so much today.
Are there any other questions that I might be able to help them with?
Comment.
I'm happy.
We love you so much today. Have a great day.